That's the distance you need. You need that space. And I wish I could emphasize like step one, take your time. For me, it was 12 years. 12 years.
Wow.
And before I even started the process of number 2. So like take time if you need to. It's okay. I know there's always going to be somebody that's like, well, you never know if they're going to die tomorrow. If that, you know,
life is short.
Life is short.
You really need to go ahead and forgive them. And it's like, that makes me not want to do it at all now. Because now I feel like a piece of shit. But if
we're back to the morality versus love. Like, I couldn't do it in a moral way. Sure, I'll let go. Sure. And I'm going to tell you during those 12 years how many times I confessed forgiveness. I mean, 30, 40, 50, 1,000. I've really done it this time. I've really let them go. I really did it. Yep, I did it. Ta-da, I let go of the debt. Yeah. Yay, me. Oh, something comes up. I'm in bed for all day. I'm in bed all day because my emotional world is going, no, you didn't.
You're listening to Shall We Unpack This? With your host, Leilani Carrasco. Hey everyone, welcome back to the SWAT podcast. Please don't run away from me today. The title of today's episode is Forgiveness, or at least how to make it less shitty. But for something that really is supposed to give us freedom. Okay, again, sorry about the cat. The cat always joins me when I'm recording. The tricky thing about forgiveness is that it is good for us to do. It lightens the load. It brings freedom and peace. And yet, all of the advice, the rhetoric, the religious manipulation around the word feels the absolute opposite of that. It feels like dying, and not in a good way. Forgive often. Forgive because you never know if the person's going to die. I'm sorry you feel that way. You know, all these things that we connect to just the topic of forgiveness, they don't feel good. They don't feel genuine. It feels like a process that's rushed along and really at the end of the day doesn't stick. I personally really hit a roadblock with forgiveness this summer. I kept like knocking heads with this person in my life. And I got to the place where I'm like, I know I need to forgive, but all that like forgiveness talk is bullshit. But I know that forgiveness is a good thing. And who can I talk to about this? So instantly I thought of my friend Lauren, who's had a situation in family and for 12 years was estranged from her parents. And I called her on the phone and I'm like, how do I make this feel less like bullshit? And she laid out the most astounding, profound, helpful roadmap to forgiveness. We're going to cover just the first 2 steps of a 4-step process. And these first 2 steps are pretty much where I am today. And the length of time between these steps can be months, years, whatever. There is no rush here. Forgiveness does not have to suck. And it can actually be helpful and it can be genuine, even if you are only at step 2, which is where I'm at right now, with simply refraining from punishment. You'll hear more about that in the episode, so let's get to it.
So what is your culture? What is your upbringing? Give us who is Lauren? What was your background?
Okay. So when I was brought up Christian, obviously, very from birth practically. I never had the conversion experience of like which was very popular in my culture of pray the prayer and all that stuff, because so I always had this like weird feeling of like I should pray the prayer, but I've literally been talking to God since I was born. And so, but knowing about the conversion experience idea is a good background for the culture I was in.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal to pray the right prayer, to say the right things, to be with the right, right. I'm going to put big quotes on right, their consideration of right, people, congregation, churches, all that kind of thing. But I was born to my mom and dad when they were 17 and 18 years old. And so they were kids raising kids kind of thing. Yeah. And they were honestly raising themselves in the middle of raising me and that sort of thing. And so that plays a lot into my childhood and into my experience with them, is especially as a mom now, I can look back and see, I mean, I have a son who is very close to being the age that they were when they had me, and it's just looking at him going like, how
And how old were you when you had him?
I was 19 when I had my son, so still young. So, and one of the biggest differences, if this matters, is that when my parents had me, they were in a position, in a culture, in a society that, whether it's both from the Christian point of view, but also just from in the late 80s, where it's like, don't say no to drugs, the DARE, plus like teen pregnancy was like an issue where it was a big issue where people were like, this is an issue. Yeah. We need
an after school special about this issue.
Yes, exactly. And so my parents were in that kind of soup. That's the soup that they were in. And so when they had me, there was a lot of shame. So much shame. Wow. And I can't say that, I can say that they made a choice to have me. So they absolutely made a choice to have me. So I give them major credit for that. However, on the other side, it's kind of like, it's always that question, and this is totally me projecting, this is not anything that they have said, but this is my projection of like, when you make that choice, there's this feeling of like, the what if. Like the, what if I hadn't, or everything I gave up. And so growing up, whether this was a conscious thing that was put on me, I don't think it was conscious at all, actually. I could say that. It was not consciously put on me. But there's this subconscious, unconscious,
grudge?
It's not even a grudge, maybe pressure. Or like just this unconscious, like, prove us right. Prove that we did the right thing. Now, I could totally be making this up, but this is my experience of life, was prove that you're worth it. Prove that you were the right decision, because we sacrificed things. Wow. And especially becoming a mother, realizing, you do have to sacrifice things, especially at a young age, to be able to have the children. Like for me, as a mother, skipping ahead a couple of years, it's like, I had to begin to devote my life to my children more and more. And even to this day, even as they get older, it's a constant transition of devoting my life to them and then learning how to individuate as an adult, how to be a human, but also raise humans. And so it's this back and forth. It takes a lot of awareness and a lot of grace. And so going back to them, my mom and dad in this situation where they're living in shame, feeling the shame of having a child out of wedlock. They got married when I was maybe about 4 or 5 months old, if I remember correctly. And they, it always felt kind of like that we made it right kind of thing. So there's these like underpinnings in Christian culture when you think of those things, which is like, we did the right thing. We made the right choice. And it's like, okay, but I don't want to just be the right thing as a product of I want to be a product of your love, not a product of morality. Like, and so there's this like battle between me of like, am I just the moral choice and not the like all-in devotion love choice? Because, and what I was going to say about me having children young is I never felt the fear or shame of having my child young.
Wow.
I really didn't. I was all in, completely choosing him, and not even choosing. It wasn't even a choice. It was like, if this happens, I'm all in.
Wow.
And it did, and I was.
Wow.
But I didn't put that together until much later.
Wow. That is so beautiful, because I've even been thinking about the choices I made. Even to get married, it was to do the right thing versus like this all-in thing. So I think that's something to like pause. Let's hold a moment for all-in versus morality. So I have you on the show today to talk about forgiveness, really to unpack forgiveness. I reached out to you and another friend in August because I was having some arguments with myself about, I think so much of what we hear about forgiveness is bullshit, and I'm processing this, and I think I had used the analogy that all of it, just looking at all of the quotes, the tropes around forgiveness, forgive often, forgive quickly, just feel like looking at canned asparagus. Sometimes it's even worse than that. It's like thinking about drinking the Vienna sausage juice. Like,
I love it. That's such a good analogy, because you think about like canned laughter on like TV, and it's like, ha 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 ha, and you're kind of like, ha ha ha. And that's exactly what canned forgiveness feels like.
Yes.
Okay, here we go.
It's so forced, and it's like, it doesn't
There's
stick.
nothing organic about it at all.
No, it is a wet Band-Aid. It just falls right off. I have you on the show to talk about it. You're like, okay, well, she's young. She has this beautiful family. Like, what does she have to be forgiving anybody about? I think we always like over dramatize our own stuff, and we forget, everybody's story is valid.
Yeah.
What is your story around forgiveness?
Oh, so there are lots of little tendrils of, I don't want to say unforgiveness because that's very strong, but I would say like there's hurt, and there's hurt, and there's hurt, and there's hurt. And each big hurt can leak into all the other hurts and create these like tangled messes. And all of a sudden you're kind of sitting there with, where's the root of these things? And so when we're talking about forgiveness, it's like, of course, we all want to go to the big roots. And that's kind of, I think, what Christianity is trying to get at when it's talking about forgiving 70 times 7 and, letting things go, is we take it as we want to get to these big root forgiveness things and have these big cry sessions and let those things go. But I think what Jesus was referring to in the 70 times 7 is this idea, like I'm saying, about these little tendrils that come off of, like, you have 70 times 7 of these little bitty root systems that come and come and come and come, like you're like a garden, and you have to go out and pull and pull and pull. Now, a well-tended garden that's been well taken care of, you only have to go out once or twice a week and just pull up what doesn't belong. Maintenance. But in the beginning, when you don't know what you don't know, these root ball systems have occurred. And so I would say my forgiveness journey has been I was emotionally, I adapted to life with numbness. Okay. Separation, distance from emotions, distance from hurt, distance from pain. And by distance, it's like, not quite as serious as dissociation, but walls or screens or compartmentalizing, putting those things in those boxes. And then, I'll return to those boxes if I need to. And often it was just easier to cut people out of my life than it was to return to the box and try to mend any sort of fence or any sort of relationship. On the other hand, that also left me wide open to boundary crossing, because I never learned how to put up. I never taught myself through these relationships how to put up a good boundary and have a continued relationship with someone without being violated constantly.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the background. My specific stories that I could say, like some of my root balls are, you know, when I was, well, it's so funny because it's like that root ball. I'm following it down. Like, well, where did it start? Where's the beginning of it?
Yes.
Like there's so many different little places to go. Hence the 70 times 7 forgiveness idea, which is the surface.
Yes.
But you know, working in forgiveness, it's like you start to realize the bigger concept that I've started to realize is that people's actions are not in a vacuum. They do not act out of this malicious, you know, ness that they just push this thing onto you. Most of the time, in fact, I say all the time, they are the last domino in in thousands and thousands of dominoes before them that falls over. And that's what creates the tidal wave, so to speak, that's what created the tidal wave in my life. And so for me, when I started to leave home to go to college, you know, my parents and I had a huge blowing up situation. And the details aren't so important other than I felt completely rejected and abandoned. And I felt put in the position of all that I kind of shared a minute ago of prove to us that you're worthy, prove to us that you're doing the right thing. It's like it all culminated into, I'm done doing that. I don't want to do that anymore. And in fact, I would even say on my end, I was like, this feels like the moral right thing to do for me. And I had to come to the situation going, just because you don't think it's good, just because you don't think it's moral, like how do I outsource my morality to you? Yeah. Or do I pull it in and go, no, this feels right? Yeah. And the choice had to do with whether or not I married my husband, my now husband, or not, and was with my husband. And when I say the choice, these are like the surface symptoms of those root balls of problems and miscommunications and lack of boundaries so it's like on the surface, this is what blew up. And so as a result, I lived for the beginning of my marriage without relationship with my mom and dad. And so that season, and there were times that we tried to mend those fences and tried to make things happen, and I didn't have tools to like exist as a human. And so in an effort to do the right thing, I would go into situations and say, okay, let's make this work, and then get pummeled. Not because hurt people, we were perpetuating cycles. So I would say the wrong thing, and then I would hear the wrong thing, and who knows?
It's so messy. Yes.
It's like, who knows? I still look back at those times and go, what did I say? And what did they say? And I kind of gaslight myself. I'm not going to lie, of like, did I make this all up? Is this all me? Yes. Like, did I create? And then comes the question, did I create this? Like, actually, yes. And this is a really difficult concept. I created this. Now, when I say that, it's not shameful, and it's not feeling bad about myself of like, oh, I did this to myself. It's more along the lines, it's actually really empowering of like, okay, how did I create this? What were the blind spots that I missed, or that I allowed this situation? Because then you can start to look and go, oh, this kind of rhymes with this other relationship, and this kind of rhymes with this other relationship, and you start to see patterns. Anyway, that's another tangent to go off of, but the important part for forgiveness is this. Then you can start to say, okay, if I created this situation on some level, in fact, the more I can take responsibility for it, the more power I can have. So let's just say I created it 100%. I can justify my anger. I can justify my sadness. I can justify and I'm allowed to have all of those feelings. But when I pull it in and I take responsibility for it, and by responsibility, I don't mean it's all my fault. What I'm trying to communicate this in the most powerful way, which is some part of me needed whatever the situation was. And in this situation, for me, I can look at it years later and go, I needed to separate myself. I chose to set off an atom bomb. I could have probably done it if knowing what I know now. Always knowing what we know now, we could have done with so much more grace and so much more whatever. Yes, that's not the point. But I chose to set off an atom bomb. Okay, great, did that, and it gave me what I needed for the next stage of my journey. Now, when it comes to forgiveness, it's like, let's go back to the whole reason that you had me on the show. I'm sorry, I could just go on forever.
No worries. This is part of the process. Which I'm learning is like, I think that's why the forgive often, forgive quickly just falls flat, because it takes away what is actually a very intricate process. Like you were 100%. Saying, with the root ball, the tendrils, the shooters. We used to have briars in our front yard, and you sometimes had to dig 2 feet to get to the main nodule, and that wasn't even the mother. You know? It's like
that was a stepmother.
I know, little stepmother nodule. So moving forward.
Yes, moving forward.
So as far as
let's just say I get to a nodule. Let's say I get to so over years and years for my story, it's like I did what I normally did, which is cut everyone off, build up big walls, electrified fence, no one's coming through, brick wall, you have to have a sledgehammer to get in here. And because you hurt me too much. You hurt me. Yeah. You did this. You know, wall. And I'm justified in my walls because you hurt me. And I tried. That's the other part. I tried. I did everything I could. I tried everything I could, and you hurt me. And therefore, I forgive you, but here's a wall.
I forgive you. Fuck you.
On the other side of the wall.
I built it with these 2 fingers.
Every little brick is put on.
Yes.
And then there's electrified fence on the top.
Yes, exactly.
I love it. That's perfect, because that's literally was my life. Was going like, no, don't talk to me. Don't, send me letters. Don't do all these things. And the hard part on that side is like every attempt from the external, let's just use the situation with mom and dad. And like, I want to be clear, like that's one situation among millions, but that's a big one that's easy to use as an example. But it's like any outreach from them towards me felt like arrows, like, oh, okay. And then it's like, okay, gotta put my shield on before I open this letter, before I open this text message, before I answer this phone call. I'll put my shield on and go, And now, don't get me wrong, the correspondences were few and far between. And if I took them out and read them, it's like, you could definitely hear the like, no, I understand what you're saying. And it's like, but that's not important. What's important is my receptors were on full alert, looking not for love. I was not looking for the best intentions. I was absolutely looking for the barbed wire. I was absolutely looking for the arrow. And I found it every time. Like, every time I found it.
I've done the same thing. I'm like,
right there and right there.
I'm going to look for all the mean shit in this.
Yes, not even considering that this could be out of love.
Oh, shit.
Not even considering it.
Not considering it.
Whereas if it had come from someone who I know loves me.
Right.
Or I was receiving, if I had my receptors were open for love. Oops. I would probably read it in a completely different voice, in a completely different tone. Wow. Like... And so just taking that on as like, that's part of the taking responsibility later. Now you don't have to take, I want to be clear, like you don't have to take responsibility while you're in pain. Like that just re-traumatizes yourself.
Yes. And then I definitely want to say there is room for each, which we'll get to. There's room for each step of the process. Yeah. So if you're thinking, well, shit, I'm still really pissed off and I've got to like rush myself along this path.
Take responsibility. No. That comes.
It comes. Yeah. And it may be years between each, and then might be a little bit quicker.
Yes. And that's the whole idea of like the root ball thing. what I want to say, if you're just starting the process of forgiveness, is start with the 70 times 7 idea, which is as something comes up, feel it, hold it in your body, notice where you get tense, notice where it hurts physically, notice where it triggers mentally, notice what it triggers emotionally. Don't rush past that. Own it, and that's part of the owning, the responsibility. Own the feeling that the charge is there because your physical body has been enabled by the divine consciousness to give you a roadmap to move forward. And so when you feel a charge, it's like a ping on your GPS. Okay, in 2 miles you're going to take this turn. You have to hear it in your body so that you know what's coming up. If you ignore those signals, that's when the walls start to go up, because your body's like, okay, she's not ready. She's not ready for it. We got to put a wall up. She's not ready to take that turn. Yeah. She's not ready to move forward. We've got to put a wall up to save our psyche, to save our emotional world, because we can't be walking around bleeding out all the time. So if you're in the beginning stages of forgiveness, what I would say is the very, very first thing, before you even start with trying to let something go, you can't let it go until you fully let yourself feel it. Now, another important thing to note is this idea of titration. Open the valve a little bit. When it gets overwhelming, close the valve. Deep breath, stand up, go outside, do some jumping jacks, do something to kind of help yourself. Okay, I'm still here. I'm in this body. I'm safe. I am not in that position anymore. Yeah. I'm not where I was hurt. I'm not being hurt in this moment right now. Yes. I'm okay.
So I am safe in this moment, which I think is interesting, because when I started going to therapy, the first exercise was, okay, we're going to imagine a box. What does your box look like? That sounds dirty. Anyway. I'm like, it's clear. Okay, well, let's make it not see-through. Let's make it a good, strong box. I'm like, no, it's clear. Okay, well, like, hide it somewhere. All right, I found it. Okay, well, then put a lock on it. I'm like, it has no lock. Basically, this imaginary box was a place to put all of the heavy stuff, and then we take one thing out at a time.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, I'm like, no, you can see it all the time, and I can access it whenever. So I did not get the box concept. Right. I was like, okay, you're obviously feeling everything right now, and it's very difficult for me to put it all away. But to accept that I have a lot of tendrils. Yeah. It's gonna be a while. I'm mad about a lot of stuff, and all of that can be valid, and I can feel safe now. And take one little tendril at a time. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So the metaphor, speaking of that works for me, is I go into a safe space, whatever that means for you. Now, something that a friend told me, she was like, people would go on these guided meditations, and she was like, I would go out and all I would think about was the dangers of that meditation place. And I'm like,
what an interesting concept.
We'll go somewhere else. Like, don't go there. No. And so I was like, okay, so this is what I do. I have a safe space in my meditation. It's a meadow, which can be very dangerous, full of wild animals and stuff. And it is surrounded in my mind. It is surrounded by trees, and those are dangerous trees. And I can look out and I can see danger because my nervous system has experienced danger. My nervous system is not ready to completely feel safe. And so part of that is going, okay, what do I need to do to make myself feel safe? So this is where I'm going to go back to my Christ-centered relationship. And I use that word very specifically because it's not about the church-centered relationship. It's not even about the Jesus-centered relationship. It's not even just about the God. It's about there's a Christness that I feel safe in, because that's where I felt God the first time, was within the context of Christ. And so for me, Christ is my avatar. He's my connection to the divine. Now, I've also expanded that to be a lot of different energies, a lot of different source energies, a lot of different angels, a lot of different, in connection with that. But Christ is my like, okay, this is a good foundation for me that feels safe. Yes. And so what I've done is I've gone to my meadow and I've put a angel shield around it and just said, you know what? Nothing, or a better way of saying it in the positive, only love, and light can come in this space. So now, and then when I'm dealing with, the box situation, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have a box.
I can see all of it.
Yes. I have a house.
Oh.
I have a house, and I stand outside of it with either Christ or my guides or ancestors, whoever wants to come with me on the journey, Holy Spirit, whoever it is. I have this house, and I'm going to tell you, it's terrifying looking in my mind.
Huh.
It is this terrifying looking house in the sense of like, but it's beautiful. It's one of those like potentials.
Okay. Yeah.
So instead of a box that I can see through, it's like I'm outside, and I know that everything I'm dealing with is inside of that house. But the word, if you want to say, I don't like the word because it makes it sound like the Bible, but it's like the word, the source energy, the light of God is the lamp to my feet. And so saying that, like, I walk in, and that's what I can see. And then I only look at what the light is showing me in that moment. So this goes kind of to the root ball thing. Mm-hmm. I only follow where the light is showing me. I know the whole house needs to be renovated. I know the entire, there's attics, there's basements, there's room upon room upon room that is full of stuff. Yeah. And so almost like unpacking my whole entire, this whole entire house that I've been, every time I shoved feelings, every time I shoved emotions, this house is
or even I'm going to remember this so I can hold this against you. Like a whole room of like, remember this?
Yes. Yeah. And so that's my metaphor. Not to take too long on that situation, but that helped me because I can't go into every room. I could. Ooh. When you renovate a house, you can totally go in demo day style and just start breaking down all the walls, but you're making more work for yourself. And so, and this is the kind of house that's like the floors are great. So you don't want to mess, so like that's what I keep in my mind. Okay. Don't mess up the floors. So that gives me incentive to only go to one room at a time.
Yes.
Because the floors are amazing. You don't want to scratch them.
It's not Sledgehammer Day.
No. The windows are original. Okay. So you don't want to break the window.
What a creative analogy.
Because you have to be very careful in this house.
Yes. So we have this house.
Yes.
That's kind of the first step. We're not tackling all of the stuff. We got to protect the house. First step is seeing the small thing. Then from there, what's next?
Yeah. Okay. Feeling it. Like I said, I mentioned earlier. Feel it. Feeling the emotional charge. Because the charge, like I said, is that GPS point to tell you, hey, there's something here. You don't want to leave it. We want to take it. We want to feel it, and then pull it through our situation. And what I mean by that is like Dr. Peter Levine talks about how energy gets stuck in our body, which is we start to feel something, and it goes in like a peak like this, and we get nervous at about this point, and we go, nope, not going to happen. So then our body thinks. Anytime we come back to a situation that even sounds, smells, acts, seems like this situation, we come right back to where we left it, which is this peak. And it's terrifying. Yeah. What we don't realize is, or what we can learn to realize is when you allow the emotion to come in, when you allow the feeling to come in bite-sized pieces, what actually happens is it crests like a wave and it goes back down. And then it'll come back again, but a little bit lower.
Okay.
And so we're talking about this within the context of safety, within the context of taking care of ourselves, taking as much as you can and letting it sit with you and letting it pass through. And by that, it's like, I might have to move my shoulders. I might have to shake my hands out. I might have to, feel where in my body is hurting and go, okay, I hear you. I sense what's going on. Now I'm going to move it through, and then notice if it's still stuck, and okay, I accept you, I love you. I'm not going to try to change you. It might not be time. It might be time to work with a professional to figure out what that is. Or I can come back to you whenever I hear you calling again. And this is part of just the gentle nature of true forgiveness. Is the reason Jesus says 70 times 7 is not because you have to constantly be forgiving.
Yes.
It's
forgive often.
Yeah.
But in a way, forgive often.
There's this teeny tiny little root that's showing itself. Start there. Okay, I can let go of that. Okay, I can let go of that. okay, I can let go of that. Oh, but then what we do is we start to look up and go, but that over there. And it's like, no, right here.
Huh.
Right here.
Yeah.
The text message that you just got.
Yeah. Ooh,
Okay.
Sometimes those are big. I'm like,
Because-
I'm mad now. I'm so mad and I want to stay mad. I need to be mad for a while.
Because the energy of that root is
Yeah.
echoing in this text message. Mm-hmm. But when you kind of go, okay, come right here to this message, starting in this present moment with this specific root, this specific little tendril of this root,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to forgive this whole thing right now. But I can look at this thing and go, are you the person who maybe sent this message? Are they doing the best that they can right now? With what they know, with what they've experienced, with what they have. Are they doing the best that they can? Not the best that I can. Not the best that I could come up with. Mm-hmm. Not what I think they should do. Mm-hmm. But with their life, with their situation, with their... And the answer is always yes. Even if we can't see it. Because it has to be yes. Because I'm always doing the best I can. Always. I have to believe that about myself. That I am always doing the best that I can. There's always a reason. There's always a good reason too. Whether it's I'm traumatized, I'm sad, I'm upset, I have low blood sugar, I need to eat something. Yeah. It's like there's always a good reason. I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm overexcited and not paying attention. There's always a good reason. Now, there's always better options. Like we can always sit here and examine and say they should have done this and they should have done this. And if they really wanted me to forgive them, they would have done this and this and this. But what all that's doing is creating a deeper root system, adding to that original root, adding to that thing rather than taking it away.
Wow. That is such a good point. I think sometimes those infractions add, and now we just got an even bigger mess.
Yes.
So when I had reached out to you, I'm like, okay, one clip that I go back to often is Maya Angelou and Oprah Winfrey. And she's saying, what's the best advice you've ever received? And she's like, to forgive. And I'm like, boo. Ew.
Next.
I know. Lame. That is such an obvious answer. But she was like, she's like, I'm not inviting you to my table and being face to face with you. It means I'm finished with you. Yeah. Now go away. I'm like, now
let's go.
I can handle that.
That's it.
So when I was talking with you, you had mentioned this book, which I might as well say I have 2 volumes of Women Who Run with the Wolves because I've read it so much.
Part 1 and part 2.
Part 1 and part 2. So in the second is a chapter on forgiveness, and you had reminded me about the 4 steps. You hear forgive and forget, and that sounds like bullshit. But the 4 stages of forgiveness are to forgo or to leave it alone, to forbear. The second one really gets me. To abstain from punishing.
Come on.
And number 3, to forget, to refuse to dwell. I think that is more helpful than just forgetting, because it's just the brain's going to remember stuff, but you can choose not to dwell on it.
Not to dwell. Yeah.
And then finally, to forgive, to abandon the debt. So I've heard that phrase a lot, that like, forgiveness is for you. If you don't forgive, you're just swallowing poison that's meant for somebody else. You know, that whole analogy that even that over time is like, I've heard that a million times, it's meaningless. But going over what even a debt is, going to just the origination of the word debt.
Yeah, I love this analogy in the forgiveness idea. And I also love that that's step 4.
Oh, yay!
Like, this is the last step. And
we don't even have to go there.
Yeah, like, this is over time and over time. And here's where this analogy works really well. So my husband and I have a business, and there have been times that we've done work for a specific individual, and the job itself, like, the job doesn't go really well, and you really don't make very much money, and, you know, there's this little thing, and then, you know, they call you back, and so you're like, okay, well, I'll go and do another job for them, and you're like, okay, so he goes and does, this is just complete for instance, but, like, he goes and does another job, and, you know, it doesn't go very well. It's like, you know, there's all this kind of resentment building up because you're like, I didn't make money on the first one, it's not really working, and then we send out the invoice and they don't pay. And so it's like, not only do we have all this labor involved, but they didn't pay.
Yeah.
So now we have this choice of like, do I pursue this person for what they owe me when I didn't really like the job in the first place? I don't really like being tied to it. I don't really want to be involved in this anymore at all. So even the amount that I'm looking for isn't really worth the amount of effort it's going to take to get it back.
Now I'm going to give even more energy. And now I'm like really in the red.
Draining. And so this is where they're talking about like you're drinking your own poison. You're expecting them to get, it's like the person on the other end receiving the invoice, either A, they don't know it's there, or they saw it and they don't care, they were unhappy. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that they may not be clicking pay the invoice and not returning the debt. But they're not struggling with this. It's not even a thought. And so this is where the metaphor works really well for drinking your own poison. I'm spending all of my energy worrying, wondering, questioning, pursuing a payment for a situation that I don't even really want to be involved in anymore. I'm not in a relationship with this person. I don't want to be in a relationship with this person in the sense of, and by relationship, I mean like, we're talking about the difference between like forgiveness and then like, what's the other word that goes along with forgiveness? Reconciliation. Thank you. I don't know why it wouldn't
That's
pop
a
in my
huge
head.
one. We're going to get to that.
Yes. So it's like, now we're getting into reconciliation territory. Whereas we're not even there yet. Like, I don't want to reconcile with this person. I don't need to reconcile with this person. I don't want to do any more of their work. I don't want to work on their house again. I just want to be done. Okay. I have two avenues. Pursue the debt or let it go. And when you're talking about money and you're talking about energy, you're talking about work, and you're talking about time, it's very obvious when I am losing money in the form of time, energy, resources, trying to collect this small ticket, big, even if it's a big ticket. It's like, like you really have to look at it and go, how much energy is it going to take to get that? And and here's the other part, am I going to get what I'm after? Based on their past, and this is where, yes, you forget in the sense of like, you refuse to dwell on it, like step 3, but you also have to like kind of use that with wisdom and go, based on their past behavior, am I going to get this debt back in the way that I want to receive it? Or are they going to pay me are they going to bring me a wheelbarrow of pennies and say, here you go, I paid you back, and cause more work? And so it's like, people are petty, if we're taking it on like the real like business level, like I've seen some petty people, and it's hilarious on the outside, but on the inside, it's like in the emotional world of forgiveness, it's like, when people are like, all right, here's your sorry. And you're like, I'd rather not have that. I'd rather not. Or the like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I'm sorry if you felt that way.
I'm sorry if you felt that way.
Oh, that's that wheelbarrow of pennies. That's your invoice being paid in a wheelbarrow of pennies. You're like, I'd rather not. I'd rather not.
There's like almost, you have to decide, because I can have a strong sense of justice. Justice won't be served. We have to, that goes into the second step of not punishing.
Oh, that's a good one.
But I think it's like, okay, so the first step too is like, I need to create some space.
Yes.
And it may not, even that may be looked down on, because in my own life, it's like, I just need some space. And even in your own process, you're like, I just need some space. And sometimes to continue, to stop the hacking at each other, you just got to separate them. Just keep them separated.
Exactly.
Like the Offspring sang.
Oh my gosh, that's literally what happened in my life. So I unknowingly, before I read this book, I unknowingly started this process because I had no tools.
I know.
I have
a hammer.
All I have is a hammer. I can't build anything. I can't repair anything. I can just break things down. So I might as well put the hammer down.
I'm out.
Put the hammer down. Yeah. And so I created space in my relationship.
Sometimes it's the best you can do.
And that is absolutely step 1, because then what I did was started to realize, to pull my energy back to me and actually have some strength, actually have some vitality in order to move on to step 2. Now, step 2, when I say move on to step 2, these aren't necessarily in order, honestly. Like you don't have to do them in this order. What you have to do is you have to take them and go, where am I in the process? Like sometimes, like I might have to go back to step 1 again and get distance again and get hurt. And then I go into step 2 to, is it forbear? Is that right?
Yes.
To kind of, to what is it? Like whole, not punish. Is that also number 2 or is that number 3?
So I really want to,
sorry, I get out of order.
I really want to sit with number 2 because that one, to abstain from punishing.
Yes, that's right.
Because here's how I feel. I'm like, okay, you hurt me.
Yeah.
Nobody should like you ever again. And it's up to me to spread the gospel on
everyone needs to know
about what a piece of shit you are.
all your shit. Put it in a bag, spread it around like wildflower seeds. Yes. Have you heard that this person Here's
is
the brambles for your yard. The bramble.
Read this tract.
Read this tract.
That's my,
the evangelical upbringing. Yeah. I must spread the gospel. That is so funny.
I love it. This does not mean to go blind or dead or lose self-protective vigilance. It means to give a bit of grace and see how that helps. So, not punishing. If I just stay not there, punishing. It's like, okay, I can see where I've punished. And even that felt like a lot of energy went into that evangelism. And it didn't give me the results that I wanted. It didn't resolve the problem. It might have made it worse. It just is a never-ending hungry monster that
that's good.
There's never enough punishment to be dealt because nobody should ever like them again, ever. And they should have no happiness. Yes. And so,
Well, and so from the perspective of, like, let's go back to the company and the invoicing. Okay, so let's talk about this customer and say this from the punishment angle. So let's say we did this work, they didn't pay, they've got this outstanding debt. So we've got this energetic transaction that's happening. So step 1, we take some distance. We take time. You know what? We'll think about that next month when we go to accounts receivable. We'll go handle that in a minute. Okay. Now we've gotten some distance. We're not emotionally charged anymore. That's the important part of distance. I don't want to be emotionally charged all the time. Yeah. I'm going to get emotionally charged when I think about it. That's a given. But I don't want to be so stuck in the middle of this, just like right here all the time, where I'm just charged all the time. That's part of taking step 1 gives space to being able to approach the house or the box or the titrating, like approaching each room to deal with things. You have to have the distance. That's why I put it in the house. Yeah. So I don't have to look at it all the time. I can go to my meadow. I can have a good meditation. I can be safe with God, with source.
A meditation.
Look at you. Oh my gosh, I love it. I'm going to make a shirt. My meditation. Don't interrupt me. I'm meditating.
Yes. So good.
Yes. But so I can go there and not have to, and know, I have stuff to deal with. Because Christian culture is like, if you have something wrong with your brother, go and deal with it right now before you try to worship. And it's like,
okay, then that means
I'm never going to go to church. I'm never going to be worshiping. I'm never going to be talking to God. Like, no, that's not what that means. That's not what that means at all. Like, and so it's like, no, I have a space where internally I'm going to go deal with that later. But it's right there. That's the distance. That's step 1. Put it in the house. Leave it there until you have some emotional, to where you can look, you can look at the house and not be charged. And then you can open the door and not be charged. Like, that's the distance you need. You need that space. And I wish I could emphasize, like, step 1, take your time. For me, it was 12 years. Yeah. 12 years.
Wow.
And before I even started the process of number 2. So like take time. Yeah. If you need to. It's okay. I know there's always going to be somebody that's like, well, you never know if they're going to die tomorrow. If that,
life is short.
Life is short.
You really need to go ahead and forgive them. And it's like, that makes me not want to do it at all now. Because now I feel like a piece of shit. But
we're back to the morality versus love. Like, I couldn't do it in a moral way. Sure, I'll let go. Sure. And I'm going to tell you, during those 12 years, how many times I confessed forgiveness. I mean, 30, 40, 50, 1,000. I've really done it this time. I've really let them go. I really did it. Yep, I did it. Ta-da, I let go of the debt. Yeah. Yay, me. Oh, something comes up. I'm in bed for all day.
Yes.
I'm in bed all day because my emotional world is going, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
No, you didn't. And it's not judgmental. It's my emotional world going like, hey, honey,
Yeah.
you still have some rooms to clean out.
Yeah.
You haven't cleaned out a single room. You keep trying to set fire to the house.
Yeah.
You keep like, no, I forgive it. Oh, it won't catch. Well, throw a Molotov cocktail in. Nope, doesn't catch because you can't get rid of it like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, lay it at God's feet. Lay it at God's feet. It's like, well, God is within me, and God is going, hey, like, this is for your growth and glory.
Yeah.
Like, this is for you. And this goes back to you chose this so you would learn and remember these parts of goodness so that you can bring yourself back to goodness. This is part of my physical density on earth. This is part of me transforming and transmuting the physical density of this push pull in this relationship. This is my little corner of the world that I'm transmuting from darkness to light. The physical manifestation of that is I have some situations and I am going to work through them until they feel like light. Now, that process is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so for me, it took years.
Okay, how's everybody doing? So we had that first step of just creating space. And that in itself, can we just talk about how creating space doesn't make you a bitch or an asshole? I think a lot of times, especially within family, it's like you guys need to be close. You have to be besties. You have to be in each other's presence all the time. So to think about even creating space is like, well, golly, you have a bad attitude. No, creating space, like we mentioned, can kind of keep you guys from continuing to bash at each other. Creating space can be a loving move. And the second step after creating space, choosing not to punish. It can be a hard thing when Lauren said, you know, what role do I play in this? Did I create this? Oh, that can feel really crappy to hear because it's like, no, I did not create this. It is all their fault. But going back to the situation I had in the summer, I opened up this message, yet another message. I'd get these messages that were really bullying, and they would be really long and full of all these accusations. Me taking part in that, me adding to that story was simply reading those messages. And sometimes I'd read them and look for things that I could store in my mind to bring up later. That is me contributing to the situation. That is me creating and taking part in the creation of this conflict. So the next time I got one of those messages, I simply didn't read it. I kind of scanned it to make sure, is this a good message or a bully message? Okay, it's a bully message. Okay, we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom and just simply say, please don't send me any more of these. And we can talk about this in person. And that is all I wrote. Those little steps where you just choose not to participate, to stop the bleeding, even in something as simple as, I'm going to choose not to even read this message and take in its energy. I'm going to stop it right here, create my boundaries, and move from there. Even if that in itself looks like you're being a jerk, you're not being a jerk. You are stopping the bleeding. So, with that said, next week we're going to cover the second half of this journey. And the reason I cut it into two pieces is, one, it would be like a massive episode that would overwhelm you. But even if you just stop here, that's great. When you're ready to listen to the second half and what to do next, then you can cover that when you're ready. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us today, for sticking with me to this point, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Join us on Instagram at SWUT Podcast. That's SWUTPODCAST for further conversations, insights, and behind-the-scenes content from today's episode. And for the complete viewing experience, tune into Shall We Unpack This on YouTube. We'll see you next week.